All flights are now boarding. Welcome to Indie Game International.
Welcome to the podcast. We are here today with co-founder, CEO, and president of Rocketship Park, Jim Squires. Jim, hello, sir. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to chat.
Yes, I'm very excited that you are here because, as my listeners probably know, I did have Shane McCafferty on the show, which is the other half of Rocketship Park. And he and I had a great conversation about especially the game Love, a puzzle box filled with stories, which I played and I loved. And but I was really eager to find out about you, Jim, because you are the business side of the Rocketship Park company. And as I've said before on the show, it's I want to provide advice and knowledge and experiences to other indie devs who may be listening. So that's why I decided to get you on the show. And additionally, I had mentioned before we hit record that I did not know your game Word Forward existed. And so it came out on Steam recently. So I snagged it, I played it, and I very much enjoyed it. So,
that's great.
Yes. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell me the story of Word Forward? Why don't first actually give us the elevator pitch, tell us what is Word Forward, and then how did it come about? Why is it just now coming to Steam?
Oh, yeah, great. Let me cover that for you. So Word Forward, as an elevator pitch, let's go with that. Word Forward is a word game. At a glance, it may look like any other word game you've seen on the App Store, that sort of a thing. What sets it apart, though, is that it is a game of chess-like strategy, I suppose is the right way to put it. Rather than simply trying to spell the biggest or best words, you are trying to clear all 25 tiles on the screen. So you have to be very, very deliberate in the words you spell, the letters you use, the direction you use them in, that sort of a thing. So it's across 500 puzzles. It's really more of a brain tingly sort of game than it is just a straight word puzzle. But it's something a little more complex, masquerading as a word game. And in fact, I can touch on it a little bit if you like. At one point, we ended up doing we had a project that started as a sequel to Word Forward, and ended up going in a completely different direction that has no letters or words in it at all. So, but its root was still Word Forward. So it's a puzzle game that works on a few levels for sure.
Yeah, I was very surprised playing Word Forward for the first time, where I thought, I don't know, I feel like I thought I just wasn't smart enough, or maybe I didn't fully understand. But then once I realized, it's interesting because it's one of those puzzle games where when I first started playing, I didn't realize how many tools were at my disposal. Even beyond the little tiles you get at the bottom that are kind of like phone a friend type stuff,
sure.
That kind of thing. So its complexity, I think, reveals itself as you play it and as you realize the way you initially think you're supposed to play it isn't going to work.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny too, because when we were initially on the App Store, folks who grabbed it thinking it was a pretty standard word game, if they didn't have the patience to really grasp how this is different, a lot of frustration from folks. People grabbing this thinking it's just the next word game from insert random free-to-play mobile publisher here, right? And it's much, much closer to a proper strategy puzzler. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. I agree with that. So I noticed, I don't know somewhere where I was doing research, that it came out on Apple TV.
It did, actually. It's funny you mentioned. So, to be honest with you, the best way for me to answer that, it's going to require far too much backstory, but but I promise it'll deliver when we get there. So the reason we made Word Forward was actually a game that Shane had made, I want to say 8 years ago now, for iOS exclusively. Back in the day, before Shane and I worked together, Shane was self-publishing games on the App Store and only on the App Store. He was coding natively in Xcode, which I am told means something, but again, I'm the business guy, so I've learned to repeat that phrase for the last half a decade. I'm sure it means something to somebody, but what it did mean to me is so that's why we're stuck on iOS. Gotcha. So when we decided to make Love, once we got into the process of making Love and we were really sort of knee deep in we're really making this project happen, we built Love in Unity. And I should probably put a minor asterisk actually at this point, just so everybody knows. Anytime I say Unity, you should probably take it with a grain of salt, only because I have had a professional relationship with Unity for the last 4 years. So it's, there's that disclaimer. I'm a contractor for Unity. So I love them, but not just because they pay me. I was a fan of theirs, and then I started working with them. So they're a delight. Okay. But as our first project in Unity, we thought, well, Love is really the big thing that we care about. So what can we do to wet our feet in Unity, to understand the ins and outs, to understand the pitfalls and the problems we may encounter, to overcome the challenges now before they become a real problem when we make Love. And we thought Word Forward is a game that ended up with 6 million players on iOS. It was a huge hit for Shane. Everybody loves it. It really scratched a specific itch. I'm sure Shane probably talked to you about how he designs games with an emotion in mind. And with Word Forward, he was trying to chase the sense of calm. So when he made it, and it's funny because a lot of the stuff is still in there and doesn't strike for the same reasons, but a lot of the choices he made in the original Word Forward for iOS were things like using the same font as the system font, right? Like things like that. So it's there's this smooth there's never friction. Everything just feels very smooth, calm, fluid. So it was a big hit on iOS, and Shane thought, well, I could, Word Forward was a simple enough game structurally that I could rebuild that in Unity, and that'll just be my project to see, what to help us learn Unity a little bit, right? To get in the weeds on that. So we rebuilt Word Forward, and we thought, well, great, because now we can republish it on iOS and bring it to Android, because Unity is great for multi-platform support. And once we did that, we thought, well, there's no reason we can't try Steam too, because Love will also be coming to Steam. We need to get a sense of the process of bringing a game to Steam. It'll be the first one that we do. So if we do Word Forward first, again, we can better understand the challenges inherent in that system. So we brought the game out on Steam about a year ago. It has had a good following, some big fans. It's performed better on mobile than on Steam, which is, I think, might be a surprising lesson for folks, but fair. I might even say the same about Love, if we're being quite frank. But that's another story. But what's really interesting is actually it's not even this week yet. It's by the time your listeners hear this, it will have happened. On December 3rd, Word Forward is coming to the Switch. So it's available for pre-order now. And again, that's because the flexibility of Unity made that something we could do. So the publisher that we partnered with to bring Love to the Switch expressed an interest in Word Forward as well, and we were more than happy to work with them on that. And to be honest with you, like I'm playing it right now on the Switch because it's close enough to launch that I have access to it, and it might be my favorite platform to play it on. It's a real joy to play with Joy-Cons. And while I'm not using the Switch touchscreen, a few of the folks who've been beta testing and have been, and they all keep saying the same thing. I forget the Switch had a touchscreen, but it feels so good to play this on the Switch's touchscreen. So yeah, Word Forward's been a bit of an adventure for us, and it's really fun that we've been able to keep coming back to it.
Very interesting. Now, what about Apple TV?
Oh my God, thank you. That's how we got. So because of the Unity support, we were looking at all the things that we could do with it, and we went, well, we can bring it to iOS and we can bring it to Mac, but also Apple TV is, it's a fairly easy switch to flip once you've already started making it for iOS and Mac, because it's all in that Apple ecosystem, and there are definitely things you have to think about with Apple TV. But again, just that forward thinking, just that planning and trying to get ready for future opportunities. So when we did this, when we were making Word Forward initially in Unity, one of the things that was a brand new idea, wasn't even on the market yet, was Apple Arcade. So they had announced Apple Arcade was going to happen, but it hadn't launched yet. And if you wanted a game to be considered for Apple Arcade, it needed to support iOS, Mac, and Apple TV. I don't know if that's still a requirement now, but at that point it was. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember if we submitted Word Forward for consideration in Apple Arcade or not. Either way, we didn't end up there. But it's likely we did, and that's probably why we did it. If not, though, it may have simply been another case of, let's see what it's like to what does it take to really port something to Apple TV in case we want to be considered for Apple Arcade for future projects. So it gave us a chance to fiddle with that. It is definitely in the same way that I say Switch is the best way to play Word Forward, Apple TV is absolutely the worst. Probably the case for any game that you play on Apple TV, unfortunately, which is a big shame. My background, and we may get into this over the course of the show, but my background is in the mobile games world. So I was very enthusiastic about Apple TV gaming when it was announced. A lot of the one-touch gaming opportunities on mobile seemed like they would translate so flawlessly to Apple TV, and a lot of them did. In fairness, it was a lot of those simpler games really felt good with an Apple TV remote. But as soon as you tried to do anything ambitious, it really felt like a bit of a clunky mess, and especially anything that required any amount of horsepower, it was unplayable, right? So it's been weird, especially when Apple Arcade did launch and everything initially supported Apple TV. I mean, it might have supported it, but boy, howdy, you didn't want to play anything on it.
Do you play Apple TV games with like a remote or a controller or what?
So I think you can play it with a controller now. I don't know that you could when it first launched. But it was, the Apple TV remote, which is just like a touch sensitive square at the top. That was, that's all the control you have basically. It clicks and it's touch sensitive and that's it. It's strange.
Interesting.
But that said, Apple TV, it's such a funny thing, and apologies for going off on a non-gaming tangent, but Apple TV is one of those things that was such a great idea, and it was just too far ahead of the curve, and it didn't see what was coming. Because now with smart TVs and everything else, everything my Apple TV could do is out of the box on any TV I buy now, including, and this is would never happen under Steve Jobs, but it finally happened. My LG Smart TV has an Apple TV app on it, right? So I can watch Apple TV Plus without needing an Apple TV box. So I think those days are long gone. I really hope people aren't making games for Apple TV, because they are. No one's playing, smart TV games either, right? The games that you can purchase on your LG or your Samsung, that's also pretty brutal. So,
right.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you by any chance plugged into the Netflix gaming service that's being talked about?
I'm aware of it. Yes, I'm plugged in. I'm not plugged in professionally. I do not have. We are not on there. I don't know that we want to be on there. From what I understand of it, and I have to say that because even though it's supposed to be available on Android now, I can't for the life of me figure out how. I think maybe in Canada we may not have access to it. Sometimes that's a real thing up here. Just like licensing stuff prevents us from accessing a lot of stuff outside of the US. But yeah, it seems to me like making the announcement of Netflix is getting into gaming sounds huge and probably did a lot for their stock. I'm really not sure on that front. But the reality of it just seems to be that they're creating their own mobile app storefront, right? That's essentially what this is. Right. The games may be cloud streaming. I'm not quite sure. But from what I've seen, it seems like the only games that are on there are things they've already published previously in one form or another, right? Like the Stranger Things games, things like that. I know they bought Night School, the studio behind Oxenfree, and Oxenfree 2 is going to be a Netflix game. So I think that's where I'm really interested. Is Oxenfree 2 now just going to be exclusive to Netflix subscribers in some weird way? Or is Netflix going to act as a standard publisher and we'll still be playing it on Steam and PS5 and things like that? I don't know. I have that big question mark over my head. I am really, really curious to see how that plays out, because we are kind of living in a really interesting time for game distribution models. What was working doesn't anymore, and there are a lot of new things on the horizon that are emerging. I don't know what's going to come out the winner. I'm very excited by Game Pass. I don't know what the business model looks like on the other end. I haven't spoken to any indies who have been in there yet to find out if they're really happy with it or not. But that said, it seems to be, at least from a consumer standpoint, that seems to be the logical direction we're heading in, because I don't think a market where indies are there are so many of us out there, and B, we're competing with $80 or $90 experiences. Like it's very, very tough at this point for us to stand out when someone's going to say, I'm only going to spend X amount on video games, and now it's going to be the next Ratchet and Clank or the next Madden or what have you. Making a $40 indie game is really just not sustainable anymore. Those days are sort of long behind us in my mind. You can probably pull it off if you're, I'm going to call it double A, I guess. There's that great mid ground. Of studios that are indie, but we're talking like 40 to 150 people, which is not the same thing as me and Shane working out of our garages, as it were. I think the days of folks like us making a strong career out of this independently are I don't think over is the right word, but I think the model needs to change to be able to support this level again. But yeah, Apple Arcade was a nice option for folks who could get into it. Game Pass seems like a very nice option. I'm curious to see what Netflix is doing. There's always things coming down the pipe. Everybody is so desperate to make cloud gaming a thing that I think we're going to see a number of other services pop up from probably from companies that you're not thinking of or aren't involved in gaming today. It would not surprise me to see a Disney gaming platform, things like that, right? Like I'm preaching to the choir, and you've probably heard this stat from half the people you interview. But like video games as an entertainment industry are bigger than all the other ones combined financially, right? So everybody wants to get in on that. Everybody's trying to get their foot in the door and make cash on this. So now when now all of a sudden you don't have to be a publisher or a developer and you don't have to take the risk on that. And as a major company, you can simply be a platform provider. You can simply open up a distribution portal and try to connect with folks. That's very appealing because it's very low risk in a lot of ways compared to actually making and selling games. You're just providing a storefront, right? Right. But that said, storefronts are also, as we've seen over the last couple of years, it's really hard to launch a successful storefront. Steam is still the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to PC. No matter how cool the Epic Game Store is, and I really like the Epic Game Store. I've always liked GOG. I was a GOG user back in the early days when it was just good old games. It's there are cool. I mean, Itch is still great too, right? But at the end of the day, all your sales are coming from Steam. It's really hard to avoid that. So, it'll be interesting to see when other players come into the market and try to push out some of the existing ones for sure.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that insight. And yeah. I do want to get into your past and you please. As a person and a professional. But real quick, I want to just revisit something we said very early on where you mentioned the pipeline for taking Word, basically in order for you guys to test out developing with Unity, you took a game that you already built for in another engine and kind of rebuilt it into Unity. Now that experience is over, or at least nearing the end, because it kind of just came out, was that a good idea?
100%. Yeah. No, absolutely. We learned a lot. I wish I could tell you the things we learned, but the development for it was actually quite a while ago. But I do remember there were so many things that, as we were developing Love, we had very clear answers to because of the work that we had done with Word Forward. And they're very different games. One's flat and 2D, and one is full 3D puzzling. But despite that, there's enough commonalities in Unity that we got a lot of basic understanding. It's really a case, and I mean that's the situation for anybody. I think like once you do one project in a certain engine or development platform, you're taking learnings forward to the next project, no matter what, right? So we just thought, if this is the game Shane has been waiting to make for 10 years, let's not go in cold on a new engine, right? And I think we're very glad we did that. I think we're also glad we did that from the Steam point of view as well, right? So we didn't just learn the new engine, but we also learned managing the Steam store. And I think that was helpful because then when opportunities came up on Steam that we could take advantage of for Love, we didn't have to learn Steam, right? Like we understood the basics well enough that we knew how to jump in and be involved in things, even if we hadn't participated on that level before with Word Forward. So a good example is with Love. We were in they called it the Summer Games Festival now. I think they've changed the name of it to something else, but it's their biannual thing where they promote demos for upcoming games. And so we were able to get Love in there, but it was a case of, I don't know that we would have felt comfortable doing that had this been our first project in Steam, had we just signed up, had we been feeling out the waters, because there's a lot that goes into making sure that you've built a demo correctly to support that. It has to exist as a different app ID and be approved through a different method. There's a whole process. And we felt a lot more comfortable and confident in what we were doing. And that helped greatly. I mean, that drove I think 5,000 wish lists for us, which is for two guys is no small task. I'll take that. I was very happy with that. So, and again, we wouldn't have done that otherwise. But yeah, and it also gave us the chance to play around with just, marketing copy and how we use assets on Steam, things like that. So I'm always a big fan of, and I think Shane would agree with me on this. A big fan of having the opportunity to experiment and test in a safer playground before you do the meaningful thing. Right. There's no, preparation is great. What's the Scout motto? Be prepared. Right. It's something we're big believers in. I think that there's an attitude towards fail fast, which I for the most part, embrace in a lot of what I do professionally. But there's an attitude towards fail fast that I think people focus too much on the fast side of that. It's a case of here's the project we're trying to get off the ground. And let's keep experimenting until we get it out the door. I'd much rather do those experiments in a low risk environment with lower pressure. Because that's where you end up with compromise sometimes when you have to fail fast is you're compromising because you still have that end date in mind. You still have a target you're working towards that you have to get to. And you're not always going to make the right decisions under that kind of pressure. Now, that said, as a company, Rocketship Park has been built in a way that we're structured so that we don't have that pressure. We never have that on ourselves, really. We do things with long timelines intentionally. We work with very few partners, and the partners that we do work with, we're very selective about, and it's folks who are very like-minded, so that we are not creating difficult situations. So it's definitely, I'm always a big fan of experimenting and doing word forward in Unity first, I think was a very, very good move for us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. I've never specifically heard that strategy brought up on this show, so I very much appreciate that perspective.
Sure.
I think it's very interesting. So let's go back. I want to tell your story, maybe like a shortened version of your whole gaming life. So how long have you been a gamer?
Oh, yeah, no, my whole life, for sure. I mean, I'm 41 this year, so I'm of the... I don't like claiming first generation of gamers because there's folks about 10 years older than me who were in the arcades in the late 70s. That's not me, but I'm right behind that. I remember getting an NES for Christmas. And I don't want to say it was pre Super Mario Brothers, but it was early enough that my pack-in was not Mario Brothers. My pack-in was Hogan's Alley, the light gun game. So that was, way back in the day. I have endless memories of playing Kung Fu on my NES when I'm 6 or 7, which was great. My first, I have distinct gaming memories. My first gaming memory, I think I had to be 3 or 4, was and this will really date me. And you look much younger than me. Would that be fair to say, Jared?
Well, I was gonna tell a similar story about my first console because I'm exactly 10 years younger than you.
So Super Nintendo.
No, for me it was the original PlayStation.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I was very excited on that Christmas morning to get my first video game console. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Continue.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So way back in the day, in the 80s, the one thing I think people who didn't grow up in the 80s will never really grasp is how ever-present arcade games were. Everywhere you went, there were arcade games. Your laundromat had arcade games. Your corner store had arcade games. Every restaurant had arcade games at the entrance when you go. They were just everywhere. It was what you did. You'd go out for dinner with your parents, and instead of annoying them by asking when the food's coming, they would hand you quarters, and you would go play 1942. Right? That was the experience of growing up in the 80s, and it was pretty cool. I liked it. But in that mode of arcade games are everywhere. One of the things that you would get on occasion is arcade games in places that made no sense. So every Labor Day where I live, there's a carnival. It's kind of the Labor Day tradition around here. There's a big Labor Day carnival. It's gone on for 70 years. And in the 80s, there would be a tent set up with arcade games in it. So it was literally just like a circus tent filled with arcade games. And I remember being small enough that I needed a proper step stool to stand on to reach. So I'm maybe 3 or 4 years old, playing Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong. So those were, and when I say, I mean Mario Brothers, the single screen platformer Mario Brothers, right? Which, for the record, and I'm going to say this now so Shane hears it because he needs to, I really still need to make a single screen platformer. That's in my heart, and I'm not going to my grave without making one. Those are some of my favorite games. but yeah, so that's, I've been gaming since then. It's hard to give just a snapshot. My favorite trivia bit about me and gaming is when I was 10 years old. I was on Let's Make a Deal, and I won an Atari. It was an Atari 2600 Junior, and it was way later in history than you should have been winning an Atari on a game show. We're talking like 1990. Yeah, it would have been 90. It was my 10th birthday. 1990, which is like we're on the cusp of Super Nintendo and Genesis, and here I am winning an Atari. So they were just getting rid of stock, I guess. That was fun. And then I hit, and it's funny to have made a life in gaming because I hit a point when I was like, 13, where I decided I was too cool for video games, right? That's the switch flips. And it's like, well, these are for kids, and I'm not kids. And I actually ended up giving away most of my gaming stuff to other folks I knew, and greatly regretted that. I really had nothing from my childhood, with the exception of, it's hiding. I don't know where it is. This is a podcast. I'm not gonna keep looking.
It's all right.
Keep talking. But somewhere in this room, I have way too much gaming crap everywhere over there. Somewhere in this room, I have one of those little mini Pac-Man arcade with the LEDs. Yeah. I've still got that from my childhood, but that's about it. I ended up getting back into gaming. Not a whole lot later, and I promise you we will not go down this rabbit hole because it would be you'd need to do a separate podcast series, I think. But I was actually living on my own from 15. I've had a bit of a weird life, and one of my neighbors, when I was about a year into that, so I guess I was 16, one of the neighbors in the apartment I was renting had just gotten a PlayStation like right at launch when they came out, and he invited me over and he was showing me the games, and he got me started playing Final Fantasy. And he said, well, he's like, I got to go to work, but like, just lock up when you're done and you can stay here. It's fine. I'm like, yeah, no problem. He came back 8 hours later from work and I was still playing Final Fantasy VII.
I knew that was coming.
That sucked me back in. Yeah, that sucked me back in. And I've kind of been with it ever since. Professionally, I've had a bit of a weird path to where I got today and where I'm at. I started as a blogger. So my journey into the world of video games actually starts, I suppose technically as a video game journalist. I kind of hate that term, but that is where I was for about a decade. In the dawn of blogging, so 2003, 2004, I started dabbling in that world and did pretty well. It was back in the days when you could still get traction doing that sort of a thing. I mean, it's the best way I can compare it to now is like, oh, you're doing well on YouTube or TikTok, right? Like that back in those days, you could do that with the words you write. You can't really anymore. But it helped. It got me some traction. And from doing my own blogging, I got picked up by a few sites where I was contributing and doing regular work, and then actually doing really early podcasting. I think 2006 we were podcasting, which is the Stone Age by those terms. And actually, in retrospect, me and the guys we were podcasting with always laugh about it now because we had numbers that, had we known they were good numbers and had we had any idea how to monetize, it's like, oh, we were huge. We thought we thought this was nothing. But as the years go on and you learn about it, you're like, oh, I regret giving all that up. God damn it. But yeah, so I took that path. I ended up, I got to a point where, like so many folks, I was doing that on the side. It was my side hustle. And I was working, minimum wage jobs, nothing super exciting. My last real quote unquote job was at Blockbuster. So that should give you a sense. But I got to the point where my part-time income, writing online, was, doing well enough that I thought I could take the gamble and walk away from, the normal way of doing a career or earning a living and let's see what the freelance life is like. And I had kids. So it was kind of a like, if this doesn't work out, we're all going hungry. It's not just me, it was a big gamble, but luckily my wife and I are big believers in like, if you don't risk it, you're never going to get anywhere. Right. Like it's, she always says, and I love this. It's my favorite. I don't know where she got it from, but it's wonderful. She says growth and comfort are mutually exclusive. Right. So, If I can't, if this isn't hard, it's probably not worth doing, yep. Right? For sure. And funnily enough, a week into me quitting my job at Blockbuster, one of my major freelance writing contracts fell out. I'm like, whoa, we're really screwed now, aren't we? But it all came together in the end. I ended up as the editor-in-chief at a website called GameZebo. They're still alive today, though it's very different now than it was then. And Gamezebo is an interesting website. I didn't start it. I was hired by them, and I worked my way up. They made their bones by covering the games nobody else wanted to cover. So it was an interesting play. I don't know why it worked as well as it did, but it did. So they were covering casual games at the height of casual gaming. But really, when we say that, we're not just talking Plants vs. Zombies and Bejeweled and things like that. We're talking about like hidden object games, right? We're talking about games that take point and click adventure style stuff and break it down to the most easy, accessible stuff. We're talking the games that where the average demographic is like females over 50, right? Like that was the audience of Gamezebo when I came in. I helped them transition from that into a site covering mobile games, which also nobody in traditional games media wants to cover, which now might be more fair than it was then when it was still an emerging thing and hadn't turned into what it is today. I could go on about that forever. But so my background is in mobile games because I had to know them. At a certain point, I was probably one of 20 people who understood that industry better than anybody else, simply because it was my job to study it and take it apart piece by piece every day in my writing. Right. So that was where I was at. I did that for a long time. I was there, I don't know, 8-9 years. It was quite a while, but towards the end, I started feeling antsy, as one does when they are doing the same thing for too long. I thought, what can I do with the skills I've developed? I know the games industry inside and out because I've been asked to focus on it so much of my career now, especially certain parts of the games industry, mobile and indie and things like that. I know what a great pitch looks like. I know how to be sold a game from somebody because I have 100 emails in my inbox every morning from people trying to get me to cover their games. I know what looks good. I know what looks bad. And I actually have a great network of other games journalists because I've been at this so long. I kind of know everybody and everybody knows me. Well, maybe I could jump the fence. Maybe I could start doing public relations independently and working with small indie companies who need the help and who normally can't afford the help at reasonable rates, make myself accessible. And together we can try to help them get the word out about their game. Right. So I started with that. It went really well. I got to work with a lot of cool projects, a lot of neat games. I ultimately ended up starting doing some agency work in the world of public relations. And that brought me both more game clients and bigger game clients, but also some stuff outside of the world of games. So, for example, I've spent a lot of the last 3 years focused on life sciences, which sounds crazy, but is also during COVID a really interesting field to be working in. I mean, deep science stuff that breaks my brain, genomics and proteomics and things like that, right? So, but I'm a curious person. I love learning new things. I love having the opportunity to learn new things. I like being dropped in situations where my mind has the potential to be blown. So that's all been pretty great. But in that process, I ended up the agency I was working with ended up securing an opportunity to work with Unity. So I've been working with Unity in their public relations for the last 4 years. It's been really, really exciting stuff. It's been great for me because I love working with developers, and working with Unity has given me the chance to do that more because they are really big on supporting creators who are using Unity and helping them get the word out. So they often, from the communications perspective, are willing to lend their power to support their creators. So it's been really, really interesting. It's also been great to just be close to the tech and to see what's coming and to understand the pipeline a little better. There's no question that my involvement there has helped inform some of what we do at Rocketship Park. Just because I get a better sense of it now than I ever would have otherwise, because as you said, I'm the business side, right? Shane's the technical side, and in many ways the genius behind everything we do. So if he, had I not been working for Unity, had he said we're developing in Unity, I would have said, okay, great, and that would have been the end of my understanding. So having the chance to work so closely with them for the last 3 or 4 years has been a really eye-opening thing for me for Rocketship Park. And that's kind of where I sit now. I also do a lot of work for a VR games company, Resolution Games out of Sweden. They're very exciting to work with. I love VR. As we're sitting here, sitting next to me on my desk, and I'm spending the rest of my Black Friday as my Quest 2. I'm a really big fan. I think it's such an exciting space to be in. AR as well is poised to explode in the next 2 or 3 years. There are a lot of companies out there who are closing the gap on how to make AR glasses work really well. There's actually some that I think are on the market right now. I think they just hit the States exclusively through Verizon. I want to say they're called Unreal, but they're the first of what I think how AR glasses are going to shape up, and it's going to make gaming super exciting. Because the challenge with AR glasses has always been, how do you put that much tech in a pair of glasses without them looking ridiculous? And the answer, which I think it still feels a little clunky to me, but I think we're going to get to the point where it's not as clunky, is having tethered glasses. So they're glasses that are actually tethered to your smartphone. Your smartphone's going to power your AR. Makes a lot of sense to me. So there's some on the market right now. I think that's the direction everything's going in. I know Qualcomm just released or is about to release a developer kit specifically focused on helping game developers build for those sort of experiences. So all the companies that need to provide underlying support for that sort of stuff are all moving in that direction, which tells me that we're probably on the verge of some pretty cool stuff. But yeah, VR gaming is great. It's always fun to work on something new and different, right? Like I said, if you look back, my career was casual games, mobile games, VR games, right? It's not. I think if I had to work on AAA games, I would be so bored to tears. I don't mind playing them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an elitist, but I just. Yeah, I mean, that's all been done to death. I want to do something different. I want to do something new. And I feel like I keep getting that opportunity because the game space has so much for that.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. I appreciate that story you just told. It's very detailed. Sure. I very much appreciate it.
I'm long-winded. I'm sure you've figured that out by now.
It's totally fine. I appreciate it.
For a podcast.
So, speaking real quick of VR and AR, what is your perspective of, I must assume that you've played it, The Veil? Falling Squirrels game. That's a
great question, and I feel really bad admitting this because I love Dave. I played The Veil early versions of it when he was working on it.
Okay.
I'm aware of The Veil. I love The Veil. I have not played The Veil yet since its release because I do not have a headset that is really, really well equipped for spatial audio. And I am currently waitlisted to get an Arctis 7X, which is for spatial audio, but they're constantly sold out. So I'm on the wait. Like, I am literally spending $200 on a headset so I can play The Veil perfectly. Nice. But it has not come yet. So I am very excited for that. I think that's great. I love the idea behind it. I love the fact that I'm a huge fan of diversity and inclusivity, and I think this industry needs more of that than any other industry. We've definitely struggled on that front. So for Dave to make a game from the ground up that's accessible to sightless gamers. I'm going to get the term wrong, and I'm sorry. I want to make sure I have it right. But essentially, gamers who are not sighted. Equally, though, with sighted gamers, right? It's an experience that everybody can enjoy. I love audio everything. I'm a big fan of podcasts. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. I love the idea of audio only gaming, and it's something that I've always been bummed there are so few experiences of.
Yeah.
Frankly, I'm blown away that we haven't seen more of that on smart speakers. I really thought that's a direction it would have gone, but
I'm blown away that it took Shane calling out Dave for me to know that game exists.
So that might be true, but it's not going to be true for most of your listeners now because, and speaking of blown away, I don't know if you saw, The Veil is nominated in the Game Awards this year.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
I must assume for audio?
That's a good question.
Maybe
I don't know.
Narrative? I think it's narrative.
Innovation in accessibility.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Yeah. He's up against some real heavy hitters, and that's the interesting thing, where he's only up against heavy hitters. Far Cry 6, Forza Horizon 5, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and Dave.
Wow.
Right? That's
amazing.
Crazy. And all those games have done great stuff. I don't know if you've seen in Forza Horizon 5, and I don't think the update's out for it yet, but it's going to be the first game that has on-screen like a sign language interpreter.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Oh, it's so great. I love it. I absolutely love it. So I'm pretty jazzed about a lot of things that are happening in accessibility. The Veil is such a great game, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed for them. On that note, as far as great folks you may want to consider talking to one day, do you know Steve Saylor? Are you familiar with Steve Saylor?
No.
So Steve Saylor is a super neat guy. Steve Saylor he's based out of Toronto. He is on YouTube under the name Blind Gamer. And he has taken his challenges. He is visually impaired. And he's used them to both sort of show the challenges that folks in his situation have with gaming, but he's also leveled that up to become really one of the leading consultants in video games for accessibility. Steve is absolutely fabulous. He's I know he worked with Naughty Dog on The Last of Us 2, and he's been involved in all sorts of stuff. Yeah, Steve is tremendous. So if you're ever doing a show focused on accessibility, Steve would be an incredible guy to connect with. He's really, really great.
I would love to. Yeah, I mean, I love and appreciate every guest that I get on this show, but I was particularly jazzed by the Veil. I would, like, when Shane said audio only game, I said, that I don't know anything about that, and then I tried it, and I am just totally blown away. It's an amazing experience. But anyway, back to you. I'm very curious about something you mentioned in your story. You said I decided to jump the fence.
Yes.
So tell me why you came to that decision. I know you mentioned maybe you were like not so fulfilled prior to that, but why did you decide to jump the fence? And is that a thing that press normally doesn't do or shouldn't do, or what?
Such a good question, and that's a question that goes beyond. So I'm going to answer it in reverse here. I'm going to start with your last question. I would say, and this is the dirty secret of the PR industry, I mean, half the people I know in PR used to be press, and not just games. Like, there are all sorts of press. The reason for that, and this is, we're going to talk about this. So games media doesn't pay money. That's just the reality. I mean, you get money, there is money, but it's like you can't. For the most part, you can't make a living writing about video games, even at a high level. There was, and I'm not going to name the outlet, not because I'm unwilling to name names, but because I don't specifically remember which one, and I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay.
But there was we're talking tier 1 AAA major outlet that was hiring for reviewers, and they were paying $200 a review. Now, I want you to stop and think about what goes into a review. If a game takes 40 hours to play, and then you also have to sit down and write about it, which is probably going to take me, depending on who you are, anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours, right? I mean, you're talking 45 hours, $200. You're talking like $5 an hour you're making. That's insane. And that's a tier 1 level outlet, right? A lot of places, most places, if they pay you, a lot of places will pay you on a revenue share, which is really, really disgusting. It'll basically be like, based on the view count of your articles, you're going to make money. So, which is gross, because most articles, and that's also, in case you're wondering why most outlets write best of lists and walkthroughs and things like that, it's because it drives traffic. Nobody actually writes anything, and this isn't just the games industry, this is like press as a whole. Nobody writes stuff because it's the stuff people should know about. They write stuff because they need to generate traffic. And that's really gross, and that's a thing that is only because of the internet. The press is arguably, in my mind, the most powerful general force that we have. The press can shape the narrative on any subject, and that means wanting to get out there and tell the story. But instead, we've created a press system now, a media system now, where everything needs to be an echo chamber that reflects back at the user and what they already want, right? What the readers already want to hear, what the readers are already looking for, not things that you need to educate the reader on, right? And I would personally argue that is one of the biggest struggles, if we want to bring it back to gaming, that VR gaming has had in terms of adoption. Now, the adoption rates are great. It's going up. The prices, as the prices come down, and they do, because the Quest 2 is so affordable, adoption rates keep going up. And we're getting to the point where it's going to be in everybody's house, but we're not there yet. But we should have been there years ago. And the reason we haven't been is because, well, I like VR. Here's what I hear frequently from press at mainstream gaming outlets, right? So not the folks that specialize, not the Upload VRs and Road to VRs of the world, but the mainstream outlets that everybody reads. I personally love VR. I enjoyed playing the game that you sent me, but I can't convince my editor to let me write about it because none of our audience is reading about VR. So it doesn't, every time we've written about VR, it doesn't generate traffic, and we can't make money on that. So we just don't cover it. Right. Well, they missed the piece where it's like, right, but if you get out there and you do the work of covering it, you're going to generate the excitement, adoption will increase. And then and I'm not asking you to sway the industry in VR's favor. I'm just saying report on the things that you think we should know about. Stop worrying about the traffic part. If you think VR gaming is great and you want to shout it from the rafters, get on your website and shout it from the rafters. But unfortunately, everything is so metric driven now that it's really, really hard to break through on that. In PR, my job is largely to figure out how we break through that noise, right? Like it's what do you do? What's the story that we can tell that will get someone in a mainstream outlet to care, right? Like how do we get that in there? And I like that challenge because honestly, like I was saying, I'd never want to do PR for a AAA game. And the reason for that is, you know how boring that would be? I show up and I say, oh, hey, I got keys for the next Call of Duty. You want to check it out? Yes. Like, okay. Like, my job is literally, at that point, I'm just a factory bot pushing buttons. There's no challenge there, right? So, I mean, I say that. I shouldn't say that. That's especially, and I apologize for saying Call of Duty, because a friend of mine heads up the PR there. So, but he's fantastic, and he's done great work. It's just, in general, the thought of I don't know. I like being backed into a corner. I'm a scrappy fighter.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a reason I started a game company with 2 people instead of joining an existing one.
Right. I'm curious, what do you think about, I mean, this industry is always changing, and I would assume the media is always changing. I used to be a subscriber to the physical magazine Game Informer.
Sure.
Before that,
I had my EGN subscription for years. I hear you.
When I was, I think it was like the official PlayStation magazine I used to be subscribed to. But anyway, now, and tell me what you think about this, and tell me if I'm average, and if this is where games journalism is now. It's YouTube people on YouTube.
I mean, in terms of making an imprint, sure. If you want to reach gamers directly, streamers are great. That's probably the best way.
Well, not even streamers. Like, I have, when it comes to, like, if I want to know if a game is good, I have like 2 or 3 YouTube game content creators that I always go to.
Yeah, that's fair. No, you're not wrong. And even for like outlets with the written word, I still use their YouTube more than I use their website, right? Like, if I want to see a game review, I'll pop on the IGN video for it instead of reading the words on IGN, right? Like, which at the end of the day for them makes no difference. But yeah, it's definitely been an interesting maneuver over. One of the things I think that's probably worth noting, though, for your listeners, just in terms of what they can learn about the world of PR, because I know that's so important for games. There's something that is a misnomer. I think people don't understand, and I think it's so crucial. Getting coverage of your game in the media is not going to drive sales. It doesn't have a direct impact on sales. It does, however, have a very, very important indirect impact on sales. And so I just want to flag this, because I know folks are so desperate to get their game mentioned, in Kotaku or GameSpot or what have you, because they think it's going to make a huge difference in terms of visibility and driving sales. What it's really going to do is it's going to lend you some credence, right? It's going to validate your game for a very specific audience, and that's a very specific business audience, right? So if you can get enough people, if you can get enough media caring about your game and talking about your game, and you can get out there and you can win awards and things like that, it really helps when you have those conversations with platform holders. If you want to go talk to Sony or Nintendo or Microsoft about being featured, or about getting on a Games Pass or things like that, right? Having that validation in hand to come with, that's fantastic. And then once you have that, that's what's going to drive your sales, right? But equating media with downloads is very, very, it's a dangerous game, and I don't recommend people doing it.
But if winning awards and all these things you mentioned don't necessarily directly lead to selling your game, then why does a platform like Sony or Microsoft care that you did those things? Is it because they have the ability to push your game then?
No, yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? Because their job, from their perspective, is they need to pick the winning racehorses, right? So they we're only going to feature X number of games. Some of those platforms, I won't name names, but you can Google, have certainly had their scandals this year about good luck getting featured unless you're willing to shell out $25,000. I honestly don't know how bad that situation is. I think there is still space for free promotion and support for smaller developers. I really do believe that's out there on all platforms. But yeah, at the end of the day, they don't want to promote or find a game that isn't great, right? They want something that their audience is going to buy. So if there's a game that people who understand games, the folks who are writing about games, the folks who are awarding games, that sort of a thing, if they go like, wow, this is a great thing and nobody's talking about it, you should be talking about it, that's really helpful for the platform holders or, publishing partners, things like that, right? People talk about the indie games gold rush, which I know was like a decade ago, but it's still a gold. In fact, if anything, it's more a gold rush now because you need someone to be prospecting, right? You need someone to filter through all that fool's gold to find something that's actually worth promoting out there. Yeah. I don't know the numbers on Steam, so I'm going to make one up. I think there's a cajillion new games that come out every day on Steam. It's something like that, right? Yeah. Like it's like the great thing about the democratization of creation is that everybody can be a creator now, but it's also the worst thing because if you're trying to build a successful business, it's almost impossible to compete. You are a needle in the world's biggest haystack nowadays. And so having media cover your game and having award wins and showing up at events to have conversations, things like that, all these things help boost your visibility for the prospectors, for the people who are trying to pick those winners. Because it's brutal otherwise. It's one of those, like, honest to God, with Love, we were nominated in the Canadian Screen Awards. And that moment alone, even though we didn't even win, we were just nominated, that helped drive more inbound traffic from business folks than any other thing that we had done during the entire production of that game, right? Like, it's helpful.
I have heard from other developers on this show that basically exactly what you just said, that what awards do is make you feel good within the industry, right?
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily drive, it feels good to have your fellow indie devs, fellow creators, to basically, like, as a community, say, we think your thing is good, right?
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
It doesn't necessarily connect with sales.
No, yeah, it's that same indirect thing, right?
Okay.
It's that same indirect path. It'll give you validation that you need to have better conversations on the business side. Because if you here's the reality, right? Because there are so many creators, if everybody is reaching out to, let's say, Nintendo and says, hey, I'm here, look at my game, check it out, this is great. They've got to go through 800 emails a day. They're not, every email where it's like, I literally just have the game for you to try or some screenshots or a video. I mean, there's no validation there. Like, there's nothing externally to say, I should be paying attention to this. If you show up and say, hey, IGN loved my game, Kotaku loved my game, Upload VR loved my game, Touch Arcade loved my game, we've already won this award, and we're currently shortlisted for this award. They go, oh, what's this? Okay, I should know what this. At the very least, I need to take the time to understand what this product is because it's validated, right?
Okay.
It's that indirect path to sales. It's I say these things don't help sales. They do, but not directly, and that's the key part, right? So many people just assume my game is well reviewed, now it will sell well. Doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Okay. Reviews, from a consumer perspective, it's more of that echo chamber thing, right? If I'm debating on whether or not I want to buy a game, I'm going to go Google those reviews to see if it's worth me spending the money, right? It's not going to help me. We've all bought a game. We've all bought a game we've never heard of based on a review that we came across, but it's not like it happens a lot, right? Like it's really uncommon,
So I would love to get into this with you, and I want to be respectful of your time. We're at an hour. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, honestly,
okay.
I'm all good.
Okay.
It's Black Friday. I can make anything work, I think.
Right
the only meeting I have right now is with Shane, and he can wait.
Okay,
so we're all good.
All right, yeah.
Hi, Shane. This is why you're waiting when you're listening to this.
Yeah. You're just like, you're like a wealth of knowledge. I got to pick.
I'm happy to talk for as long as you want. No problem.
So I want to talk to you about, because you kind of just mentioned it, the psychology of pricing a game. Like the psychology on the gamer. So I'll tell you, so you just mentioned like an avenue through which a person can buy a game, right? You never heard of the game, you see a review, it's a positive review, so you buy the game.
Sure.
You probably know this, but I'm going to bring it up, maybe you could speak to it. If you can, maybe for just take I'm an average gamer, right? I have a Switch, a PS4, and a PC.
Sure.
Where, especially when it comes to indie games, when/where do you think I buy games?
Switch. I would assume Switch.
Well, not on the platform, but where within each platform. Where do you think I go in the storefront to buy games?
I mean, I would assume. So that's a good question because you're an average. Yeah, for the average gamer. I mean, the main featured page is always helpful because that's where you just land when you land. Beyond that, I mean, I know just taking my perspective as a consumer, I often just go to the sales and scroll through them when I'm bored. That's how I pass my time. I know there's usually 2,000 sales on Switch at any given time, but I will waste 40 minutes on a Saturday afternoon just browsing through all of them because I have nothing else to do. I'm like, I'll fill my time. It's fine, right?
So that's what I was getting to. 100% the sales page because it's a constant revolving door of games you've never heard of that are ridiculously cheap.
Yep.
So
I have one right now that I am on the fence about buying because it isn't about the PlayStation and Xbox Black Friday sales. I had never heard of it, and I'm like, oh, this seems cool. I should check this out. I haven't bought it yet, but I'm really close. So you're absolutely right.
What is it?
I hope I get the name right. I think it's called Rustler. So imagine old school GTA, but like really old school, like the top down first two GTA games, GTA. Okay. But it's medieval, but it's still the tone of a GTA game. So you're stealing horses and burning witches and like.
I think it's on Switch, right?
It may also be on Switch. So I spotted it in the two other sales, but it could be on Switch too.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry. Go on.
I got distracted. So so I've gotten into this with other developers, like the idea that like you would price your game. Let's say your game's to make the proper price for your game is $10, right? So what you do is you price it at 20 and you just literally always have it at 50% off.
Yeah.
Is that a strategy?
It's a strategy, and it's not necessarily a bad one. So here's my take on pricing in games, and it's not the greatest take in the world. I believe in two very, very diametrically opposed approaches, and I kind of like both, and it's a problem. One is the Nintendo approach, which, as I'm sure you realize, there are Nintendo games from 20 years ago that you can still order full price, right? Like they've just never come down, and their reason for that is strong, and it makes sense. If this game is worth $80, it's a game worth $80. And just because technology has changed doesn't devalue the quality of the game we've prepared. Great. I get that. The other end is I know that nobody spends money at all, and that sales can be a huge driver of revenue so that you have to build towards that. So we generally try to approach a middle ground. There's a third piece to this puzzle that you haven't touched on, and I think it's probably the most important piece. And it's understanding your market size, how much revenue you need to drive to cover your costs, and what the likelihood of you actually making the sales you need to make are. So when we made Love, we understood that it's actually a really, really small market for that game. It's a niche game, right? At the end of the day, it's a puzzle game that touches on emotion. It's something anyone could play and enjoy, but it's going to be a pretty small group of gamers that we need to hit. So we knew that we needed to sell X number of copies. And it became a case of, if we price this game too low, we will never make our money back on this game, because even if we sell as many copies as we think we can sell, it's just not going to hit it. If we price it higher than we feel that we could, there's a chance that, if someone's going to buy a game at $20, they're probably going to buy the same game at $25. That's my feeling, right? So you can always bring a price down. You can never really bring a price up without it becoming problematic. Actually, I say that there are some really interesting examples of bringing the price up, and it's worked well for certain companies. But in my case, as a small indie, it would be very hard for us to justify increasing the price considerably after launch. So we tend to err on the side of caution. We believe that you certainly shouldn't be selling a full indie game experience for less than $20 or $30. It's hard to make it sell at that price, but I don't think that you're going to sell more copies at 10 than you are at that. And it also gives you more wiggle room when it's sales price time. Because at that point,
I'm sorry to interrupt. What do you mean by full indie game experience?
That's a great question. That's going to be a matter of opinion for anybody. So, I'm definitely the guy to have that conversation with, because Shane and I are going to argue until the cows come home that that's what Love is. But the reality is, you can also finish Love in, if you know what you're doing, hour 40 minutes. If you have no trouble with the puzzles. Most people, I think the average playtime is like 4 hours, but it's a shorter experience. But I'll give you another example: A Short Hike, which was one of the best games of the last year or the year before. I don't quite remember when that came out. You can finish that thing in 90 minutes, and that's 100% a full experience, right? When I think of something that's not a full experience, I suppose I would have to go back to terminology that doesn't really make sense anymore. But what I'm thinking of are the games that come out, and not that they're necessarily bad games, but would have been at home in the boxed, PC game bin at Walmart, right? For $5 or $6 or that sort of thing. Those experiences exist. Word Forward is one of those experiences. I won't lie at all, right? To me, Word Forward is not like a full indie game experience. Word Forward is this is like a quick, fun, simple, it's easy to digest. Anyone can jump in and jump out. But on the development end, Word Forward did not take nearly the amount of time or resources that Love did. Love is a big project, right, for us. And so to recoup that cost, we need to price that accordingly, and if we don't believe in it as a big project, we shouldn't have been doing it, Okay. So that's sort of where we're at. But with something like Word Forward, which again, great game, very different, kept simple for a reason. It's a streamlined production, so we can put it out there cheaper. I think God, I should know this off the top of my head. I think right now Word Forward is $5 on Switch and $5 on PC. Those are the current set prices. And I want to say $2.99 on mobile because mobile is its own weird pricing piece that you can't. I much prefer pricing parity, but it is what it is. The perk of mobile, though, and pricing lower is that if someone already likes the game enough on PC or Switch, they might be willing to shell out another $3 to have it on the go with them. So yeah. I don't hate that. That part's all right. But yeah, you also have to really factor in for the fact that aside from a very select few people that will pay full price for a game nowadays, you have to discount. And if you're going to discount, that means you need to price accordingly in the first place, because if you price too low, you're going to have a problem. For Love on Switch specifically, because that is by and large where most of our sales have come from. Switch has been really, really good to us for Love. I don't ever want people to take too much from anything I say, because everything is an isolated incident, right? Like everything is its own use case. I went out for dinner with another developer the other week. First time I've been out for dinner with anyone outside of my family in 2 years. That was fun. So I think COVID is going very well up here right now. We can kind of do that. I don't know how long it'll last, but I'm happy. But I went out for dinner with another developer who had also put out a game on multiple platforms. In fact, more platforms than we did. They're on Xbox and PlayStation as well. And they said Switch was like a bomb for them. That was by far and away their worst platform, which surprised me. But again, like every case is isolated. But for us, Switch was strongest. And so we launched with a pre-order discount of 50%. So if anyone got in early, they saved half. And then after a little while, so that nobody felt burned, we started participating in regular sales at 90% off, which is an astronomical figure to drop your game by. But the quantity of units that moves is so strong that it would be crazy for us to not do that. Like it's just, and we've done it more than once now. It wasn't just a case of like, thus far, it has not proven to be a situation of diminishing returns. When we drop to 90%, we're seeing good sales continually. Eventually, that's going to stop. We'll eventually have reached everyone who would ever consider the game. That's just unavoidable. But we've been on Switch now for about 6 months, and I think we've done 3 sales so far, and I believe we're heading into another one around Christmas. It's been fantastic. It's at this point we're on 4 platforms for Switch. We are on 4 platforms for Love. We're on Switch, Steam, iOS, and Android. And Switch has made up, even though Switch is one of the last platforms we launched on, it's made up 90% of our sales. Like it's been unbelievable for us. They've been absolutely wonderful to be on. And I can't tell you why that is, other than people are much more comfortable sitting on the couch browsing their sales on Switch, I think, than like no one's going to do that on Steam. That's just not how it works anymore, you know?
I will say, I'm sorry to interrupt. So I found, and I'd like to have this conversation about sales, about discounts with developers, because that's where I find most of these games. I found Love, again, like, and that's the thing I like to tell developers. They probably already know this, but I didn't know your game existed until you put it on sale.
Yep.
Like that's the main point I like to make.
100%.
So that's how it happened with Love.
Well, even AAA now is all sale, right? Like, when was the last time you paid full price for a AAA game? Because unless you need to play it on launch day, if you wait 3 months, it will be 30% off every time.
I remember when Black Ops Cold War came out, my friend and I were like, nah, like, no. And then it went on sale like 50% off, when we were like, all right, yeah, why not? You know? So yes, I agree. I am a recent adopter of PC gaming. I
do the same, to be honest with you. So we're in a similar boat.
Yeah. So I mean, I got a gaming PC literally because of this podcast, because I started asking people to call out other developers, and they 9 times out of 10 call out people who are only on Steam. So I really had no choice. But I will say, and I'm curious what you think about this, I find as much as Steam is great, I find their store not that easy to navigate. I think their UI is like not very easy to navigate either. I don't know. Like when you click add to cart, this is super nitpicky and random, but like when you click add to cart, it brings you to another page, but then you have to like if you click continue shopping, it brings you to this other totally random page. And it's just, anyway, when it comes to sales, I think the point I'm getting at here is I think consoles are so much better at showing you sales than Steam is.
I 100% agree with that. And I'll go one step further on that. The only thing that I felt Steam had an advantage on consoles with was wish listing. So even a game that's already out, right? You throw it on your wish list, so when it goes on sale, you're notified, that sort of a thing. But now consoles have come around on that too. I'm not sure about Switch, but I know at least for PlayStation and Xbox in the past year, they've added wish listing, which now, like, not only do I still browse the sales constantly, but when there's a sale on, the first thing I do is I open up my wish list and it'll show me if anything's dropped in price. I'm like, yes. Perfect. Yeah. So they've solved for that. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure the next step is getting push notifications through the PlayStation or Xbox apps when a game on your wish list goes on sale. Right. And I'm looking forward to that. That'll be great.
I mean, that on the one hand, like when I first joined Steam and I would get those notifications, like this game you want is on sale, I'll be like, God, now I got to go spend money, but at the same time, it's a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So there, like I said, there are obviously like benefits to Steam, but there's some weird, like when it comes to finding games on sale, or I don't know, it's a weird thing. But I'm curious. I'm really curious about wish listing. Like, what does wish listing actually do? I feel like people on like Twitter, especially, are like constantly asking you to wish list their game.
Great question. So it's. I don't want to say this because I might be wrong. I certainly don't want to steer anyone in the wrong direction. But I feel like it's a bit of a mirage on the horizon that people don't realize is just a mirage. At one point, having a lot of wish lists for your game before it launched would be how you got the Steam editorial team to notice you so that you would get featured and things like that, which is, again, very similar to reviews and awards. Wish lists work the same way. You want to drive that wish list number up. But like the reality is either A, it doesn't work like that anymore, or B, the number of wish lists you need to get is so astronomically impossible that it's like you're not going to, unless you're that AA studio, it's not going to happen. Like you're 1 in a million chance of it happening. The last time I heard a number from somebody on that of like what target you needed to hit to get featured, it was 70,000 wish lists. Which is just, I mean, maybe you can do it. Maybe I'm speaking from personal experience. So, don't take what I'm saying as law, anyone listening to this. But to me, I can't imagine a world where I'm getting 70,000 wish lists on anything. But then again, I'm a 2-person studio, so what do I know? But that's a crazy amount to me. I've worked with AA studios who have not hit those numbers either. I can say that without naming names. Wow. So
crazy.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So. I do want to respect your time. I think you have a wealth of knowledge that we could get into. I do have a kind of like a lightning round. It's like 5 questions I ask everyone that I get on my show. So I'd love to just get into that right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is the newest question. It's kind of goofy, but I'm very curious to hear your answer. So sure. If a bunch of independent video game developers got together to form an indie dev supergroup, and you were one of the members, what would your role be?
Oh God! That one I can actually answer. That one's easy. So every indie developer I know begrudgingly does the business part of things. And every time Shane and I meet and hang out with any indie developer, and like, I'm sorry, this is the least humility anyone can display. But they always end our chat at some point by saying like, God damn, I got to get a gym. Like, how do I get that guy so I can not deal with funding applications and tax problems and marketing and promotion and all of that? Like, how do I get a gym? So, I mean, the short answer is I would be a gym. I would continue doing what I do for Rocketship Park, but at a broader level. And I would enjoy that a great deal, to be honest with you. That's a part of why I love the work that I do. I know I keep saying I'm in PR, but the reality is I'm sort of in whatever people need me for. So I love being able to fill different gaps for different companies with things they're not able to do. So yeah, it would probably be a lot of that. The other piece I would probably contribute, because I'm doing a lot more of it lately with some clients, and I'm really enjoying it, is marketing copy in terms of like coming up with taglines, or, I recently named an expansion for a game, which was the coolest thing. I was so delighted. I started working with this company, again, can't name names, but they had a team of 9 people working on it for 2 weeks. And on my first day with them, I said, here's a list of 10 ideas. and they instantly ran with it. I'm like, what? I just named a thing and it's going to be out in the wild. Oh my God.
Very cool.
So it was, yeah, I love stuff like that, right? It really scratches an itch for me creatively. But yeah, it's nice that that's the easy part for me, you know, to get my creative juices flowing. I can do that. And then I can quietly go back and do paperwork for 12 hours and everyone's happy.
Right. Yeah. It's funny you just said that because how you mentioned, like, I love being as small as I am and knowing as little as I do in this industry, just because it's like, It's just so cool for me as just a gamer to be able to talk to people like you, people who make games that I love. And I recently had a similar experience, like what you said, you named an expansion pack. I was able to play test somebody's indie game. And
awesome.
Like, for me, like, that was the cool, like, if nothing comes of this podcast, like, that alone was like the coolest experience. So anyway, now, what is a typical release day like for an indie video game developer?
I mean, for us, not as hectic as you would think. It's the build up to the release day that's hectic. It's the getting everything across the wire, making sure all our T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Release day is I mean, for me, and this is, you know, my release day mostly leans on my PR background. It's just about making sure that my press release hits the wire, that I am chasing every person in the media that I wanted to know about the game, that I am hustling with every person that worked on the game or had any involvement to make sure that they have keys, make sure that they know that we launched, and ask them to signal boost for us. But it's not a hard day. It's, you know, release day, everything before release day is hard. Release day is like the switch is flipped, we're done. Which is so different than the rest of the industry now, where like release day used to be switch flip, you're done. And with everything moving to live services, everything being about the content roadmap and how you're going to support the game 2 years from now, launching your game is almost like the starting line for the rest of the industry. So, but yeah, and indie to me, it's still like, okay, well, that's the only stress that we would have to worry about on launch day is Shane's stress. Because if we launch and something genuinely horrifying happens and the game is broken in a way that we did not discover, he needs to go into full panic mode and deal with that. Luckily, that has not happened yet. So you know, knock on wood, I'm pretty thrilled. Yeah, our release days are good. It's also a lot of nerves about, and I would say release week is a lot of nerves about not necessarily the initial sales, but about whether or not we're going to get that featuring anywhere, whether or not anyone's going to express that interest, right? Like it's refreshing the app store every morning to see if we've landed on the you know, new games we love page or things like that, right? Yeah, it's anxiety, a lot of anxiety, but yeah, I mean, it's in terms of actual workload, not so bad.
Okay, very cool. Appreciate that. What is if you could deliver one message, one distilled message to the gamer, what would it be about indie game development?
Oh my God. Has anyone given a nice answer to this question?
The loveliest answer that I've gotten to this question was thank you.
Oh, that's a great answer. I wish I thought of that instead of the mean things I just thought. But
you're right. Usually it's not. Usually it's some form of you should be nicer to us.
Yeah, and I think, and so I'm not even speaking from experience because we have a lovely community. We have never had anyone get angry with us. We have never had negative feedback. Like we have just, so this is not about my experience at Rocketship Park at all. I will make that clear. But in general, because I see how other developers are treated, you just be cool, man. Like that would be if I had to distill it to anything, just like understand that we're also people and we're also working really hard and we also want your game to be good. You know, at the end of the day, everybody's working towards the same goal here, delivering a product that you're going to be happy with. And if that means delays so that people don't have to crunch and make their lives miserable, actually, that's cool and a good thing. We should all be happy about that, right? Yeah. Like, if it means that you're not going to get all the features that you were hoping for, I'm sorry, but it's, you know, we just have to, we're launching what we're launching. We're doing what we're doing. Yeah, be cool, man. Unless it's a AAA game that launches broken and then you can be as mad as you want.
Right.
This idea of launch day as a beta nowadays drives me crazy.
Dude, it'd
still be cool though.
No, I agree. The one thing, and obviously that's like a whole bag of snakes or whatever the term is, but the one thing that kind of blows my mind, one little comment I want to make is like, it's so amazing to me how like people make fun of a company like Ubisoft for putting out the same Assassin's Creed game, blah, blah, blah. But it's amazing, like Far Cry 6 works on all the platforms that it was released on. And these days, that's like a pinnacle. That's like a peak of like AAA game releasing. You know what I mean? The fact that it works. It's so fascinating to me.
No, absolutely.
But anyway,
well, no, and spot on too. Like, and you say, people criticize Ubisoft for releasing basically the same Assassin's Creed every year with a new theme. But the reality is, people buy them. And my favorite quote of the last year is Todd Howard over at Bethesda. I don't know if you heard this when they announced the Skyrim Anniversary Edition that just came out, and people were critical of like, seriously, Skyrim again? It's been 10 years. And he said, and I quote, "If you want us to stop releasing it, stop buying it." Right? Like, that's, at the end of the day, it's still a business. And if they found a formula that works, they're going to stick with it.
Yeah.
If you want Ubisoft to make something different, then don't buy Assassin's Creed games. I don't buy Assassin's Creed games. Like, that's it. You vote with your wallet, though. Like, that's everything. Everything in entertainment is voting with your wallet, which is why it's very hard for me to get a movie I would be interested in seeing into a cinema. Because at the end of the day, you can sell a lot of Captain America action figures and I can't.
So now on the flip side, you have so much advice because you've been in this industry quite a long time in many different roles. But if you could distill one piece of advice to your fellow indie devs, what would it be? Just one message. That's actually a really easy one for me. That is identify your local resources and use them. That 100%. So many indie developers go into this really indie, really alone, not having a network, not having people around them, not knowing who to reach out to when they have questions, not knowing where to turn for help. So I'll try to, because I know I talk forever. I'm so sorry about this. Right. No, I appreciate it.
I'll try to condense it if I can. So Shane and I, when we started the company, one of the first things that we did when we launched our first game is we tried to make sure to attend as many conferences that were relatively local to us as we could. I hate the word networking. The word networking leaves a very gross feeling in my mouth, but the reality is, you need to meet people in your industry, and you need to make friends. I mean, really, making friends is a much nicer term than networking, because that's what I'm after. Networking to me is about like, I'm going to get out of you what I can, and you're going to get out of me, and like, it's not so gross. It's so gross. But you have to make friends in your industry, and going to conferences really helps with that. And to give you an example, the very first conference we went to, it was out of Ottawa. It was a lovely weekend we had up there. We met a developer and publisher who was based on the East Coast of Canada at that time. He was seated at the same table as us. We just had a great time chatting with him. Lovely guy. And 5 years later, he's the guy who published Love on Switch. And that, like, it happened because we built that connection. We built that network. We met people, right? So similarly, because we're based in Ontario, we have access to government funding. There's a program anyway you can apply for it. And so we did. Like, I was aware of it, again, using resources where you're at, right? So why make a game without the funding to actually make it properly? So we were able to do that. We were able to get to know the people who were involved in that, which helped us grow our network further. Here, we're based out of Niagara. So we're right next to Niagara Falls. We're like the big city to the left of it. And there is a... I don't even know what you would call it. It's an innovation hub, I suppose, called Innovate Niagara. And they are really wonderful folks who helped us in terms of preparing funding applications and connecting with other game developers in the area, things like that. So again, we grew our network further. We met more people. We have more people we could draw on, more people we had met and got to know, right? When we wanted to do playtesting, we worked with the game development program at our local university. Right. We're going to access that. And then based on that, Shane actually ended up getting a part-time teaching job, teaching game development to these students, because we built a good network. We built good resources there, good connections. So, at the end of the day, as much as Love is a Rocketship Park game, Love is really, it's a Canadian game, it's an Ontario-made game, and it's a Niagara-made game. And that's not just lip service. That's because there are people at all of those levels who really played some sort of a hand, whether it was giving us good guidance or advice and conversation, whether it was doing play testing, whether it was helping us fund the game. It was, everybody, our art team, our art was outsourced. We did not do the art in-house at Rocketship Park, and it was outsourced to another local developer, Pixel Nuts, who are great folks that we only know because we went and reached out to our community, right? Like, we got to know our community. So yeah, don't make games alone is my giant piece of advice to the indie games community. Get to know folks. Don't expect anything of anyone. Just because other people can do things doesn't mean they owe those things to you. And also make your resources available to other people. It's got to be a give and take. That's how all this sort of stuff works. But that's the same rules apply to any kind of a community you're a member of, right? 100%. Yeah. Be a good neighbor in terms of being a game developer, and people will be a good neighbor to you.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think to add on to that, or to compound it, basically, like what you said, networking leaves a bad taste in your mouth. You prefer making friends. It's similar to the sentiment that it's all about who you know, kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, when in reality, it's business is about relationships.
Absolutely. Right. I never want to work with people that I don't want to work with. Like even if there have been good opportunities for Rocketship Park that we have turned down solely because we're like, these are the people we're going to be in business with. And I don't know that that's what we want. Right. I understand that business will always be about money, and anyone listening to me should probably take none of my advice, because I actually don't go money first on this sort of thing. Yeah, I would much rather. I'd rather Rocketship Park make less money working with the people that we want to be working with. Like, you only live once. Try to enjoy it. Surround yourself with the people that you want to be around. Right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So,
like they say, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard that. That's great.
And I just want to, real quick before we get to the last question, I want to call you out and say that you, and this might be advice for indie devs, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You were the first person when I reached out to you to try to interview the creator of the game Love. You were the only person who replied to my email saying, "Hey, dude, I looked up this podcast you claim to be hosting, and it doesn't exist." So you were the only person to actually do a little research and make sure that this person reaching out to us as a studio isn't just like, I don't know, who knows. And so then I responded, like, the podcast hasn't launched yet, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I think that would be good advice, So I just wanted to
do your research
that.
always. Yeah. Oh my God. And I mean, God, I hope indie developers know to not get scammed. It worries me that nobody looked into it. That being said, so, I mean, two sides to that coin, I suppose. Well, not even two sides to the coin, but 2 points here related to that. One, my looking into is just a natural reflex, because, again, I work in PR primarily. That's my side hustle. I don't know. Rocketship Park might be my side hustle. I have like 2 hustles that ride in tandem.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, that's like, whenever I get an inbound for any client, I need to, if I don't recognize the outlet or the person, I've got to do a little vetting. That's just par for the course. Because in PR, you will get a lot of offers that sound really exciting if you don't know what you're doing. But you can smell the bullshit from a mile away if you do. Not that I smelled your bullshit, but like there will be offers that are like, oh, we want to have your business on to be on this show that airs on CNBC, and it's hosted by insert random celebrity that you kind of know here, right? Like, it's hosted by I don't know, Kathy Ireland, whatever, right? Like, it's like it's a name, but it's not anyone gigantic. What's his name? Lawrence Fishburne is one of the names that they use. I don't know that he actually does anything, but they throw it out there, right? Weird. And so people who don't know, they're like, this is great. And then you start going down the path, and they're like, oh, and it's $15,000 to appear. And you're like, well, it's probably worth it. I'm on CNBC. And what they don't tell you is they bought infomercial time at 3 a.m. That's all it is, right? Okay. Like, so there's scams everywhere. There are also scams everywhere in game development. The number of cold call emails I get from, like, hey, we want to do your voiceover services. Hey, we want to do your this. We want to do your that. We want to do whatever, right? Like, so much so that when I got the calendar reminder today, and Jared, I'm sorry, please don't feel bad when I say this, I kind of forgot we were doing this morning. I knew it was coming up. I just forgot the day. And so I saw it, and I thought, oh, is this another one of those scams where someone like scheduled a call with me, even though I didn't respond to them or agree? Because that happens, right? Like, so I would hope that game developers have their bullshit detectors on, because it's really, really important. Never work with anyone that's a cold call, because they're desperate enough for business that they're reaching out to people they don't know. They're trying to grow their network, which I appreciate, but there are better ways to do that in a way that builds trust. Building trust is the most important thing you can do in life and in business. So yeah, work with people you trust. Don't work with cold call people at all. I have one other piece of advice I wanted to give, and I can't remember it, and it was so good. If it comes back before we're done, I promise I'll shout it out.
But wait, I cold called, so
that's fair. But you know what? You cold called. But it was a reasonable cold call. It was a media outreach cold call. Those are going to happen. And you held up to vetting. You really did, because I think I knew more about you than you told me. by the time you responded,
Okay.
which is good because I saw that this is not your first podcast. I saw that you have others.
Right.
I saw the quality of people that you interviewed on the other people. Like that's the other thing too, right? When I vet people, if it's something I've never heard of, even if it has low numbers, even if it's not going to have a huge traffic reach, which is like, that's fair. People are growing things. You can really get a sense of the quality just by seeing who else they've talked to, right? You can go down the list and go like, oh, this is other people respect this person. Maybe there's something to this. I should look into this. No, you checked out with 5 stars, Jared. You were just fine.
Right on. Appreciate it. So speaking of 5 stars, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we've gotten so much information from you and interesting anecdotes. You've been very generous with your time. We are significantly over what we agreed upon, but I do.
That's my fault. I know it.
That's all right. I do, of course, have one more question. I was hoping you could please, Jim, call out another indie dev that you respect and admire that you think would make an amazing guest on this show.
So I really, really enjoy Tony Walsh. Tony Walsh is I don't actually know his title, so I'm not gonna fake it like I do. But Tony Walsh is one of 2 people who run a little studio here in Ontario called Phantom Compass. Actually, not so little. They had some pretty great success over the years. They have made. Have you ever played Rollers of the Realm?
No.
But
wait, hold on. Is that Dave Evans' wife?
So Dave Evans' wife runs Phantom Compass as well, and then Tony Walsh is the other guy who runs it with Erica. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, this is how I know it's like Niagara Game Devs. It's a very
I love it.
We're all one big family, right?
Yeah.
So Tony's actually not Niagara though. Tony's based out of Toronto.
Okay.
Tony is great. They made Rollers of the Realm. Is a pinball fantasy hybrid. It's kind of a pinball RPG. I am a huge fan of pinball. And also I am a nerd, so I enjoy fantasy things. So that game scratched a real itch for me when it came out. They're actually working on, I want to say it's a sequel. It may be like a Redux kind of a thing, but there's a whole new Rollers of the Realm coming out, which is very exciting. They also did a tremendously cool car combat game called Auto Age. But what I love about Tony, so Tony's a great conversationalist anyway. The first time I met Tony, totally not through gaming means. Well, a little bit through gaming means, but not through business means. He was a friend of a friend, and we were going to a big indie game party thing. It's the best way I can explain it. It was actually incredible. They rented out the Art Gallery of Ontario, which is like the big art gallery in Toronto. And they did have you ever heard of the Wild Rumpus?
No.
So I don't know if they do anything anymore. They probably definitely don't now because of COVID. But the Wild Rumpus was like this touring indie game party thing where they would rent out incredible venues and then they would showcase like 10 games, but in really neat ways. Yeah. So that was the first place I played Johann Sebastian Joust. The if you ever, you're nodding, you know what I'm talking about. So imagine playing Johann Sebastian Joust not in your living room, but in a giant open space where there is a ring of people around it. It's like a death fight has happened and 400 people are standing like cheering and all. It's the craziest thing.
That's awesome.
Stuff like that, or like Nidhogg, before Nidhogg was released, they had that on this, like they had it projected on the wall, but I mean, it was 100 feet tall, right? Like, so super cool stuff like that. Donut Country, I'm going to get it wrong, but the game with the hole that eats stuff, they had it where you actually, like, you would reach under a thing and you were manipulating the hole physically with your hand. Like so they did, it's the coolest stuff. Yeah. So I met Tony there. He was a friend of a friend that I was going with. And for whatever reason, Tony was dressed head to toe like a flying monkey from the Wizard of Oz. So I think it was because it was very close to Halloween, and I think he thought it was supposed to be like everyone's coming in costume, but nobody came in costume. Tony was just, and it was like, it's a flawless flying monkey costume. I immediately knew I was going to like Tony. Yeah. So Tony's a great guy. The other thing I like about Tony, and we didn't really touch on this, but his studio, in my mind, really proves an interesting counterweight to Rocketship Park, because there are 2 very distinct ways of operating a business our size. I don't say we disagree on them. We both take 2 very different paths. I don't know how many people take the path that Shane and I took, but the path that Phantom Compass took, and it's working really well for them, is like Phantom Compass is their job. That's what Tony and Erica do. That is they, noon and night, that is what they do. It's their full-time gig. And the way they're able to do that as a studio of a certain size, is that in addition to the projects that they make, they also do a lot of external work. I hope I'm not giving up secrets here. I certainly hope this isn't a problem for me to say this. But it's very common. Like every studio of our size that I know does that. That's a thing. So, you might be playing, and I'm not saying the Phantom Compass made these, but you might be playing a kid's game on a website promoting the TV show of something, right? And that's like a studio of our size made that. It's contract work to pay the bills while the studio works on their next big thing. That terrifies me to my core because I don't want to be responsible for other people's income. So to do that, that's when you build out a team. That's when you have 4 or 5 people, like you're growing it, you have employees, and you're constantly out there hustling for that kind of work to make sure that you can pay folks. It's a great model and it works really, really well. I'm just too much of a coward to take that plunge. So what Shane and I do, we actually kind of do the inverse of that, which I don't know how many people do it the way we do it, but I really like it. So Shane and I, essentially, it's very similarly structured insofar as we both make an income elsewhere, and then we're able to use that to make our projects at Rocketship Park. So instead of basically building out work through Rocketship Park to pay for Rocketship Park, we just both maintain our own independent practices, right? So I do mine in the world of public relations and communications. He does his in the world of development. And then we're able to feed our kids and pay our mortgages and everything else. And then we're able to come together and just make Rocketship Park about the games we're working on, right? So we're not scrambling to find all of this contract work specifically for Rocketship Park. We're just able to keep playing to our strengths, right? That's kind of the nice thing, because if we were bringing work in, we may have to sort of endlessly be bringing other people in to work with us so that we're filling the holes that different clients need. But instead of, if we're both laser focused on our one area, it really, really sort of ensures a continuity of work for us that I don't know we'd be able to have if we were doing piecemeal work at Rocketship Park. And like, we do work with other people. We've brought in people on an ad hoc basis. I would like to do more of that for our next project. I would love to be able to hire contract folks for a few months at a time, a year or so. That would be lovely. We have not done anything on that level yet, but again, staying small and nimble means that we're never biting off more than we can chew. It's the same story that goes all the way back to why we did Word Forward and Unity, right? Like, let's take those small, safe baby steps. Let's play the cautious game, so that we're never biting off more than we can chew, and our wins are real wins from the standpoint that we're at. We never overcommitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is such a pleasure for me to make an example of Rocketship Park. I think that you guys are really doing it right. I completely appreciate your desire or your ability to share the knowledge that you've been doing with us so far in this interview. I remember too, during the interview with Shane, he struck me as just very like cool, calm.
Irish?
Well, like very cool, calm, and collected. I remember 100%. In the middle of the interview, I was like, you seem like really well adjusted to this whole crazy like industry. And I think you are similar, like you guys you're just very smart about what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I think it helps that we're both really old.
I wasn't.
So much of the industry are bright-eyed people who come in young, and it's very easy for them. Unfortunately, they get taken advantage of so frequently, and it breaks my heart. And they also dream big in a way that is ambitious, and I love. I never want to squash that, but it doesn't always jive with the reality of how business works. So yeah, we've been through the ringer enough in so many different parts of our lives that we're like, we know how to be cautious. We know how to play our cards close to our chest. I
didn't want to bring up age, but the first thing Shane said in response to what I just said about him being well adjusted was I think he said, well, I'm 45. And so I was like, fair enough. Yeah. So
I feel bad bringing up age because I actually think that, I would say this at 41, but I think ageism is a real thing, and it's especially a thing in our industry. In general, the thought of 40 being old is absolutely mind-bogglingly ridiculous. It's this construct that we have to make us feel like we have to work harder because our retirement's coming. We gotta but it's all nonsense. My body's gonna keep working about the way it works now until I'm like 72, maybe. So my body and my brain, and frankly, and this is the secret I will share with everybody who are young, and this has nothing to do with games, but if you're 20 something and listening to the podcast because you're in games and you want advice, stop thinking you're ever going to be an adult. You're not. Like, you're just going to be your brain's never going to, like, I am no different now than I am when I was 17. I just I'm a stone that's been smoothed out, but otherwise, I'm still the same guy. You're never going to grow up. It doesn't happen.
I remember like realizing that video games for me were not, in fact, a phase.
Right? Yes.
You know? Like, you get to a certain age where you're like, I'm never going to stop doing this. This is just a thing that I do.
Well, it's kind of nice that we live in a culture where we're allowed to do that, right? I feel like if video games happened 40 years earlier, it would have been beaten out of children. Like, you get a job. This is over. Be an accountant. Move on.
Right.
Don't have fun. I'm like, I like fun. Fun is great. Jesus, if I didn't have fun, why would I be here?
So the last thing I'm going to have you do is just give the people at home the rundown in terms of how can we get your games, how can we contact Rocketship Park, all that stuff. Give us the rundown.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have 2 games in the market, Word Forward and Love, a puzzle box filled with stories. Word Forward you can get on iOS or Android for $2.99 US. You can get it on Steam for $4.99, and it is available for pre-order as we record this on the Nintendo Switch. It's only $4.99 regular price though, so it's not a bank breaker, and it's the rare puzzle game or word game that's more puzzly and head scratchy than just spelly. So I hope you enjoy that. And then Love, a puzzle box filled with stories is currently on Steam, iOS, Android, and the Nintendo Switch. We are considering coming to some other platforms. I don't know how much of a hand Shane may have spilled on that one, but I'll leave it at that. I'll stay fairly tight-lipped. We're looking at other options. But yeah, please, that would be great. And like so many folks in the indie space, now that we're finally past getting out on a zillion platforms with 2 of our games, we're starting to get heads down on our next project. So hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk about that again in the near future.
Very cool. I would love that. So just one more massive thank you to you, Jim. Also, additionally to Shane, everyone at Rocketship Park. Additionally, you talked a lot about community. Thank you to everyone in the Niagara area who has been so nice and agreed to talk to me. And it looks like hopefully I'll be speaking to Phantom Compass, which is right within that realm. And everyone up in that little part of the world, you guys are awesome, and I really appreciate everything that you've done for me, for this show, and sharing your knowledge and your experiences.
Well, you're welcome, and it was so nice to be on here, Jared. And if I'm ever back on, one of these days I'll explain why the Niagara game community is the way it is, because there's a whole story there, too.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
Next time we chat.
All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared.
Well, that wraps up the episode. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two in the process. Thank you so much to Jim and also Shane for coming on the show and talking about games and, of course, the business side of making games. Please check out Word Forward on PC, Switch, and mobile. It's super fun, and I have been addicted lately, if I'm being honest. Find Jim on Twitter at Jimmy Canuck. That's JIMMYCANUCK. And you can also find Rocketship Park on Twitter at Rocketship_Park. Rocketship Park can also be found on the web at rocketshippark.com. Okay, please follow me on Twitter. IndieGameINTL is my Twitter handle. You can also email me if you'd like at sumadrepodcasts@gmail.com. Please email me or tweet at me if you would like to sponsor this podcast, or if you have a great suggestion for a great guest to be featured here. One more giant thank you to Jim for joining me, and one big, huge thank you to you for listening. And of course, one more thing, there should be a bonus Christmas surprise episode coming on the 25th, so stay tuned for that.